You're listening to The Range, Gardner-Webb University streaming and on-demand radio. My name is Jeff. In the studio, Dr. Elizabeth Amato.
Good morning.
We sit down each and every week to talk about things political, and we have not had trouble coming up with a topic.
No, absolutely not. It's been actually thinking about what we can't talk about because there's simply so much.
And one of the things in our little pre-conversation that we're noticing is there's a lot of stuff out there, but how much of it is true or reality or whatever is kind of hard to cut through.
Right. There's been a lot of news, a lot of reports coming out, but it's not clear always what the facts are of what's happening and what's analysis and speculation and people airing general grievances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you hear things like it is being reported that, but can you pin it down? And a lot of that has to do with the resignation of Advisor Flynn.
Right.
So let's talk about National Security Advisor. And let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
What does that mean, National Security Advisor?
Well, precisely that. It's one of those lovely titles that does kind of mean. It means that he is one of Trump's top advisors when it comes to issues of national security. Like when the president wants to know what is in our country's best interests for our security, he's the guy where you go and get that perspective. And that's what his job is. And there is a National Security Council that advises the president, and Flynn is one of those top advisors. So it is a very prestigious position, very important, and given the emphasis that Trump has given to national security as an issue, those are people who would have his ear.
Okay, so he made it through the confirmation process, but then it's just been, 3-4 weeks, and he's had to resign.
Yeah, this is, we've never lost anybody that quickly.
Yeah, what happened?
Well, he did something very naughty. Basically, and there were some rumors of this effect prior to his nomination. In that gray period after Trump was clearly the winner and in which Obama was still in office, apparently Flynn spoke with some Russian diplomats, particularly with respect to some of the sanctions that President Obama had leveled against Russia. And the chatter was that, well, maybe Trump would be receptive to lifting some of those sanctions. All of this very hypothetical, very much when Trump gets to office, maybe this is something would happen. And,
on the surface, on one level, that doesn't sound so bad. You have the an advisor to the incoming president talking to a foreign leader, a very important relationship, a very important country, but it does cross some lines. Explain how it crosses lines. It's a very clear line.
There's an act. It's called the Logan Act. And this has been a problem in the United States, right? Because we do have a nation where there's an administration, an outgoing administration, an incoming administration. We've needed to set some boundaries between how to negotiate that. And what the Logan Act does is it says that up until that moment, in which the current administration is in power, no private citizen whatsoever can conduct any foreign affairs or speak with other diplomats under no circumstance or no authority. So even though Flynn or Trump or other individuals are part of the incoming administration, they have no legal power to be able to start those negotiations. And this is a very old law. It actually stems from John Adams' administration, and it dealt with this precise problem, right? John Adams was the outgoing administration. His party, the Federalists, were in power in Congress. But the incoming administration and the incoming group to Congress were all Jeffersonians. They were all Thomas Jefferson fans in his party. And Thomas Jefferson had one of his friends, Mr. Logan, who was also a friend of Benjamin Franklin. Like, this man was a very prestigious individual. He was a prominent citizen of Pennsylvania. He went to France to have negotiations because the United States and France were having problems, basically French Revolution and whatnot issues. And John Adams and the Federalists in Congress went wild. They were just fantastically angry. How dare you, a private citizen, upset what were our policies. So what the Logan Act does, in short, is it ensures that whoever is the current government can enforce their particular foreign policy perspective, and private citizens, regardless of maybe what administration they're a fan of, don't have any authority.
Mm-hmm. I think the shorthand they use these days for all that is that there's one president at a time.
That's true, yes. Here's just another little interesting tidbit. Even though I just said it would be the Logan Act that he would be violating, if they, being the FBI, were going to actually prosecute him under anything, they probably wouldn't do it under the Logan Act. Oddly enough, this is one of these weird customs. People always say you violated the Logan Act, but they'd actually prosecute it under something like a lower level, like you lied to the FBI.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Now, is that something that is being floated as a possibility? There could be.
Well, it's being floated, right? That is the right way of putting it. Right now, it's still too ambiguous what precisely happened, and we're in the fact-finding stage. Mm-hmm. And once those facts are found, and if he did, I would say, since he's resigned and Trump has disassociated with himself, he will be left to, hang and dry on his own.
Mm-hmm. Now, is the Jeff Sessions, the new attorney Sessions, the new attorney general, is he looking into this? Is he going to be doing some sort of investigation?
I am not aware of how involved he is at present, right? There's been a lot of dossiers that have come out and such like that, but I'm not sure at present if Sessions has actually stepped forward to say that this is something that he is going to vigorously undertake. Mm-hmm. And if that is something he may be weighing at present, right? Mm-hmm. How intense and how visible does he want to be going after this as an issue?
Another issue that is coming out of all this is, how do we know he had that conversation?
Right.
And do we know what was actually said in those conversations?
Right. Yeah. Those are all very good questions. And that's especially where we get into this issue of, there's a lot of speculation, right? Here's what we know, right? It was leaked. Right? We know, because clearly Flynn would not have been speaking to Russia and everybody knowing about it, right? Because he knew that would have been wrong, right? So somebody in the bureaucracy in Washington, in the administration, in the executive branch, in some sort of secret capacity, CIA, FBI, somebody of that nature, Homeland Security, they leaked it, which in and of itself is actually also illegal.
Interesting.
So we got one of these lovely situations where, do two wrongs make a right? There's that issue, right? Like, whoever in the administration did this, that is illegal. You cannot do that, right? They've signed leaks are leaks for a reason. It would not be authorized, and they would be violating some part of their clearance. Mm-hmm. So that's an issue. Where is this coming from, right? And why is there a leak? And it is like looking for a leak in your house, right? Where is it, and can we plug it up?
Yeah, we see the puddle.
We see the puddle.
But where's the water coming from?
Where's the water coming from? Because you need to stop it, right? Because it'll structurally damage your whole affairs. There are good reasons why certain things need to be kept secret, right? To be able to talk about and deal with them. And a lot of times it's a time issue, right? We cannot reveal this right now, but in the future, these things can be revealed and will be made public. Because we always know transparency is an issue. What's curious here is, what is the motivation of the leak, right? And that is something we really need to think about. Is the motivation simply somebody who is in the administration, knew what Flynn did was wrong, and they wanted to expose it as they weighed the cost and balance of it, and they're like, I know leaking it is wrong, but gosh, what he did was wrong too. This needs to be known. Mm-hmm. This is wrong. Or is it more of I really want to take the Trump administration down. Mm-hmm. I'm angry. There's conflict between my position and the Trump administration, and I am eager to find ways of sabotaging my own administration. That is a much more problematic problem. The first one is problematic, but that one's more of a private citizen knows they're doing wrong, but is interested in seeing that right is done well. But the issue of a conflict between Trump's administration, between the White House and his own bureaucracy, that is a huge problem. A president needs to be able to have control of their bureaucracy, and they need to be able to sort of keep it in line and to some extent, because the bigger issue is there really are reasons for national security and for secrecy.
I can imagine that's quite a tall order to control, because that bureaucracy that you're speaking of is always there.
It's massive.
When a president comes or a new president comes in, that bureaucracy remains.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, at the top level there are changes, but on the workaday level, those are the same people.
Oh, yeah. No, the great thing about bureaucracy is, from their perspective, presidents come and go. Max, you're there 8 years, right? They are lifers, right? This is their job. And from their perspective, you get what we call bureaucracy sort of entrenchment of position, where bureaucracy comes up with their own policies, they come up with their own ways of doing things, and it can be actually very difficult for the White House, the administration on top, to actually change that, right? Because how do you in 8 years convince an organization as massive as the Pentagon, which is the largest bureaucracy in the world, or any of the other bureaucracies that we have, to change? The institutional folkways are so entrenched. How do you do that? And so administrations have this conflict a lot of times. Sometimes it's easier than others. An administration can do things. So Trump can actually approach his bureaucracy and try and gain their trust, try and get them to be cooperative. There are ways of doing that. You need to negotiate that as somebody who is on top. And it is not always easy.
Well, I can imagine in the transition period in particular, there were a lot of harsh words between the intelligence community and the incoming president. Maybe a little bit of an attempt once the swearing-in ceremony was done to sort of heal those wounds, but there definitely seems to be a tension between the security apparatus and the new president.
Absolutely, and part of this is simply, one wonders to the extent that Trump has sort of considered this. That, Trump is famous for saying you're fired, right? And he's been very vocal, right? He, as a businessman, he knows what it's like to run large numbers of people, right? He knows what it's like to be in an executive position where you're commanding others and subordinates and you're delegating and all of those things. He understands administration. I do think that. But bureaucracy is different in Washington. You can't fire those people. They're civil servants. Yeah, I mean, they are. It is downright near impossible to fire a civil servant. You can move them to another office where you give them busy work to do, where they're doing nothing productive, but they're still going to pick up that paycheck. Their job security is incredible. And he was very vocal about that, right? I mean, the things that Trump said is, he said, that's a problem. It is very difficult when you tell people that they are the problem, and then you have to work with them to get them to work with you, right? That is difficult. And I think Trump in the future needs to think more about how he can negotiate both his campaign promises to clean up Washington, to try and get Washington working. And I think all Americans agree that, I mean, we all are held to our jobs, right? It is a problem if bureaucracy doesn't always have to. But it does even threaten those who are doing their jobs. And he needs to appreciate that with maybe a more delicate touch.
Okay. Related to that story, something that's coming out really today, yesterday, you start hearing about this idea that maybe the intelligence community is not sharing all of its intelligence with the president.
Yes.
Because of the leaks,
right? Which
actually may be coming from the intelligence community,
right?
So, help me figure that out. I mean,
this is called dysfunction. This is a serious problem, right? This is a very great problem. The way the executive branch works, and I think we even mentioned this a couple weeks ago, is that the president is the guy on top, and regardless of where you are in that ranking, that's where your loyalty is, right? And so it is a president cannot get things done if they do not have the cooperation of all the pieces. And when the internal departments are fighting, and when they're fighting such that the American people know about it, that's problematic. normally internal squabbling in the executive branch we don't see very much of, right? Or you really have to be very deep into studying this to kind of realize that there's a tension between the CIA and the, NSA and all these other various alphabet soup letters, right? But this kind of very public and internal fighting, it makes Trump look bad. It makes his administration look bad. It ruins his kind of ability to bargain and deal with Congress. It sort of destroys confidence. It's bad from even a foreign policy perspective. Diplomats see that. They know it. They're watching our news. That's problematic. It looks bad on the United States. There's no good that can come out of that.
Right. So, just this whole idea that maybe not all intelligence is being shared with the person weighed with that responsibility is really, I think, showing us just how chaotic it is right now.
And there's distrust, right? I mean, there is normally, bureaucracies know they got to work with whoever comes in, and usually they do, right? But it is damaging if the bureaucracy is resistant, if they're unable to share with each other. That level of distrust is problematic for our national security and for our government to be able to negotiate with other countries, right? If they cannot actually trust each other just enough to, what we're talking about is sending them emails, right? Like, we all know how to do that, right? And most of us work with maybe people we don't like, but we know how to be professional.
But you have to work with them.
Right,
exactly.
You have to work with them, right? And what we're seeing is there are people digging their heels in, and they're not trusting each other. And some of them maybe have legitimate concerns, right? Where is this leak coming from? Because if this is leaking, you don't want more stuff to leak.
Exactly. It's getting quite serious there. There's this infamous 35-page document that's floating out there that was at first dismissed as groundless fake news, etc. Now we're hearing that there are actual investigations into what's in the document. The document purports, I've actually read it, it's online, it's easy to find, actually purports to say that there's been high-level back and forth between Trump as a private citizen and the Russian government for years, and the implications of that could be pretty profound.
Yeah, that I almost wouldn't even know what to say at that point, right? Like, I can't think of a parallel situation. What would be the concern there? Why would he have done that? That almost raises more questions. That raises way too many questions, because there is no previous precedent on that, especially given the fact that Trump is now president. That's like even weirder than just violating the Logan Act.
And there's no official pronouncement that this is under investigation. Yet again, it's more leaks and press reports.
Right, and it's problematic because where would the investigation have to come from, right? Who's watching the watchmen, right? The president's job is to enforce the law. The classic problem with the president is, well, who is enforcing the law on the president? Yeah. And it has historically been difficult for that to occur. There have been independent councils that have attempted to do that. That was part of the whole Kenneth Starr issue in the 90s with Clinton, which the point of independent councils were a response to Nixon, because clearly Nixon was covering stuff up. He fired people who were the ones investigating him, but there's just never been a really good way of doing that. Right. And a lot of times these scandals don't come to light till later, right? You can go back to the 1920s if you want to and find out that Warren Harding had an incredibly corrupt administration. This before there was Watergate, and now we put gate at the end of everything. Yes. It used to be the Teapot Dome scandal, right? So prior to Watergate, everything was blank Teapot Dome scandal because the Teapot Dome scandal was the Harding administration.
Interesting stuff, fascinating, rumors and rumors of rumors and all kinds of stuff coming out here. And it does paint a picture of a chaotic start to the Trump administration.
Yeah, this is not a good start at all. I mean, we could go back to the issue with the sort of sloppy rollout of his immigration ban, and that right there looks kind of juvenile, right? Like, that looks like an administration that just hasn't learned the ropes yet, right? And there's a reason why people can complain about it, but a lot of people are willing to be forgiving of it, right? That's just you haven't learned the ropes yet. We won't make those mistakes again. This issue, the back and forth with the Russian government, this has the potential to be a drain on the president's resources, a drain on his ability to govern. And I do phrase that as a potential. We don't ultimately know what will happen.
And even if nothing concrete comes out of it, and there's no smoking gun or blanks on tapes.
Recording tapes, yes, there we go.
Even if there's none of that, I mean, it just have the potential to just sort of dog him from this point forward.
Yeah, it does, right? If you didn't like Trump, this is another piece of ammunition of another problem that you have with him, that if you don't like Trump, 4 years from now, you're still going to be bringing this up.
And on the flip side, the Trump supporters have plenty of ammunition to say, well, the problem is actually these leaks coming from official sources that shouldn't be leaking things.
Absolutely. And that's what, going back to these are two wrongs, right? Like, both sides can point to Flynn shouldn't have been doing what he was doing, and the other side can say, but the leaks shouldn't have happened either. Those people were also violating the law.
Yeah, it does sort of point out the division within the country.
Right, and this is also problematic, right? We want people to be law-abiding, and
But, yes, we would hope.
We do.
Dr. Elizabeth Amato, thanks so much for coming by.
Thank you.
Once again, I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about next week. If you have any questions or comments, just email them here, info@wgwg.org.